Hello again. This is Mike Siver with the No Fences Show. And for those that haven't tuned in before, we're talking about the fences that we either unconsciously, subconsciously build around ourselves or other people unintentionally build around us. And one of the things that does that is simply as your last name. And Carrie and I have been talking about this. And by the way, I'm sorry, this is Carrie. She's my guest on the show tonight. We're a little bit laid back right now. We're just sort of relaxing. So, and we were talking earlier about the names. And in my town, where I grew up, my sister and I ended up in the same grade because I failed a grade years before in the fourth grade or so. I talked about this on a couple of shows ago, but we both had the same last name, and her name was Linda, and I go to different classes and say, oh, you're Linda's brother, she's the smart one, or you're not as smart as your sister, or how come you can't figure that out, your sister does. And I was labeled as the dumber. I was older than her, but I was the dumber one of the two of us. Both, oh, you're the Siver, you're not the smart Siver. And right below us both was another sister who was really smart. So I was the guy in the middle, the dumb one in the middle. And that stuck with me a lot of my life. Now I got over that, but it took a lot of time. You were telling a story about your family, or your name, and I returned back to that hometown where I grew up in. And to this day, it's still the same. Not with my sister and myself, but other people with their last names. Oh, your dad was a drunk. Are you going to be like your dad? Your mom played around a lot when she was a girl. Are you going to be like your mom?
Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Oh, how many times you hear that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a saying. And you know, I don't know how old that saying is, but I remember hearing that when we were young on cowboy shows.
Well, we're setting the course and setting people up, putting a fence around them to be what, be that.
And, you think a lot today about science and technology and programs that are involved today. I mean, there wasn't psychologists back in the cowboy days. They weren't there. There weren't the people that thought about how language affects people back in those days. They were survivalists. They just survived, and you toughed it out. And if you didn't, you died, most cases. And you became whatever they said you were going to become, because that's who you were. They built that fence around you, but nobody knew that back then. Today, with the information we have and the thoughts that go into our lives and the things we talk about, all this stuff comes to light now. And I'm amazed that it's not affecting more people quicker, that we haven't changed our ways. We understand it, but we still build fences around each other. And you were telling me about your family, with you in school with your brother.
When I went to junior high, my first day there, the teachers already had me labeled by the troublemaker brother I had before me. Oh no, we have another troublemaker here. And they called me by name. Oh no. So I had to overcome that and make a way for myself. But I was already labeled with that troublemaker just because my sibling before me was troublemaker.
And I think people do that. I think their intention is to be good. I think when teachers used to tell me that I wasn't as smart as my sister, I think their intention was to make me want to be.
Right.
I think they had good intentions. I really do.
It's the way we word things, Mike.
Yeah.
Just the way that we word things as people, to instead of saying you're not as smart, say, I know you have it about you. Your family is a smart family. That in itself will set your psyche and set your mind to achieve better, or to, be able to be smarter on your own. I mean, it's a biblical principle that you're calling those things that are not as though they are.
Yeah.
By just saying, I'm smart because I have smart family genes, you're causing yourself to have the ability to be smarter.
And I think a lot of times, and I agree with you, that I wish more people would pay attention to that.
It's to how you say things.
To how you
It's
say
not
things.
what you say, but how you say it.
I mean, the teacher may have said to me, you know, you seem to be struggling a little bit more than your sister does. How can we help you get over that?
Right.
But that's not the way they used to talk. And I don't know whether they still do or not, but I don't think they talk quite like that anymore. Maybe they do. I haven't been around schools for a while, but that kind of stuff starts to build fences around kids.
Mhm.
And it starts at that early age. Now, if I had, and I don't remember if I went home and told my mom that, I don't think so. I probably just swallowed it and stuffed it.
Right.
But I'm sure if I'd have told my mom, well, the teacher says I'm dumber than my sister, she may have tried to do something. I don't know.
Right.
I want to presume that she would have. And most parents, I'm not sure how they would react. I know.
Well, there's so much going on in the world today, Mike, that it's hard to address every little thing like that, or to cause it to become a red flag that you have to go attend to it and you have to correct it. You don't see it as a sign that something you have to go and fix.
And why not is the question, I guess.
That's exactly right, because everything we see or hear is part of what's going to dictate the future.
And we're talking about a
You
child.
don't pick up on it and hear it. That's right.
And we're talking about a little girl or a little boy or a middle teen. And the middle teens, with their body changing, their hormones racing, things are happening in their lives like crazy. That's a point in their life where I think we don't pay nearly enough attention.
It's definitely not as big as it should be. To give you an example with paying attention to your children, my daughter had she loved school, and all of a sudden she started saying she didn't like school. She didn't like her teacher. She hated her teacher. She didn't want to go to school, and she kept saying this, that I don't like my gym teacher. And I immediately picked up on that all of a sudden she's saying, why do you not like your gym teacher?
Right.
Well, when as it turned out, she had said it a couple of times. I paid attention to it and I thought about it. I calculated mentally, there's something going on, because it's not like her to not like school or to hate someone or not like someone. So anyways, then that night when I tucked her into bed and we said our prayer, she prayed for God to help her teacher to be nicer.
Wow.
Talk about listening. Whoa, I need to go to the school and meet this teacher.
Yeah.
She had a new teacher there. It was a gym teacher. And I went straight to the principal and I said, I need to talk to you. My daughter is all of a sudden not liking school. She doesn't like her gym teacher. And she prayed for him last night that he would be nicer to them. And I said, I want to know what's going on. And come to find out, he was in the Army, and he was a sergeant. And he was putting them on the line. If they'd step off the line, everybody got in trouble.
Yeah.
My daughter didn't like it, that she was getting punished for other people not being on the line and doing what they were told. And that's what her problem was. Because when we finally asked her, got around to that point of it, it was, well, when they step off, I can't control them, and I'm getting in trouble. That's not fair. I stood up for her, and I told the principal, I will not allow you to punish my daughter for somebody else's mistakes or somebody else's actions. And he tried to explain it to me that that was his way of doing it. So, well, not with my child, it's not. Because it's not fair. I won't ever let her take on the burden of somebody else's mistakes or behaviors. If she's not doing something wrong, you don't punish her. I won't allow it. So anyways, the teacher was gone before long. So, you stand up for it. But the point I was getting at is that it's our job as parents to pay attention to what our children are saying. And it may not be something that's going to change a teacher, get rid of a teacher, but On the other hand, our child's future is at stake. My daughter turned out, and grew up to be a great person. She stands up for what's right. She knows how to fight for what's right. She has great respect for me. She has respect for her elders. But if I hadn't raised her the way I did, and showed her by example, because we're leading by example.
Yep.
If
Yep.
we don't care what they're going through, and that they may have had this little moment in their life, if we make that our issue, that's gonna show them who they, it's teaching them how to be the best they can be throughout their life and what's important in life.
Right. And that example you were talking about with your daughter, it brought to my mind that kind of discipline in a group is okay when you're in the Army, and when you're in the Boy Scouts, and when you're up in an older age group of things where...
Right, she was kindergarten, first grade.
Well,
kindergarten, yeah.
And that's where I was going with that, is there has to be age-appropriate consequences.
Right.
Age appropriateness is something we forget a lot about.
Right.
And we have to remember that when I was in the Navy, it was the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
If one of us messed up, the whole platoon got it.
Well, and that's fine as adults when
Yeah.
you understand, because you're gonna hold that one adult accountable. Where a 5-year-old can't do that. They can't stand accountable for the other 5-year-old's choices.
No, and that's where it's important to be age appropriate, because
Well, and not
obviously-
every parent taught their children, you will obey your teacher. You will do, if they tell you to sit there, you sit there.
Yeah.
And that's the way she was raised, while the other kids weren't. And why should she, it just didn't make sense to her that she was getting in trouble, because she was always getting praised because she did do it right.
And that's where we get the age appropriate stuff, because when you're talking preschoolers and kindergartners,
She was kindergarten.
their attention span is like 30 seconds in a lot of cases.
Ashley's wasn't, boy, she was on it.
Well, that's yours, and I
Yeah.
understand that, because you did what you had to do. But
Yeah.
most kids at that age, they don't have that long of attention span.
Right, they don't.
And
No.
that has to be recognized.
Mhm.
Now, do you allow that to run the route? No. Do you discipline that? Do you control that? Yes. But age appropriately, not like you said, group consequences for one person doing something wrong.
Right.
Because
I
they're
didn't feel
not.
that was appropriate punishment, and it was punishment. I didn't feel
They
that
are.
was appropriate at the time,
Yeah.
so I stepped in. I did not intend to get the teacher fired, but as it turned out, he didn't get fired. He had quit his position
Yeah.
because he didn't know any other way. Well, drill sergeant isn't for a kindergartner.
No, it's not.
So maybe he'd moved on to the high school level, which would have been fine for me. Either way, my daughter liked gym again.
Well, that's okay too, that certain things have to be done that way and done correctly, where he either had to be told, you can't teach kindergartners the way you teach Army people.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's an age difference, and the age appropriateness is not there. You cannot hold kids accountable, or hold kids accountable to teach each other,
Well,
because it won't work.
well, for Ashley, she did not understand why she was always in trouble.
Yeah.
She didn't get that part, because she'd never heard of, she would never punish for somebody else's behaviors. So she was just like, why am I always in trouble? I don't
Yeah.
like this guy,
And that's why too, a
Poor
lot of parents, when they have an older sibling, babysit a younger sibling. And then hold the older sibling totally accountable for the actions of the younger sibling.
Right.
That's wrong. It's okay older, maybe 16, 17, 18, but to have a 12-year-old babysit a younger kid, and they do it all the time, a 13-year-old, you can't hold a 13 or a 12-year-old responsible for a 5-year-old's actions and behaviors, because first of all, they're not old enough to understand the maturity of what they're doing. They're hoping, and the parents are praying, everything's gonna go okay that night, we're going to the movies, and you're gonna watch your baby brother, and you're gonna put him to bed. I don't believe that's right, or that's fair, to hold a middle teen or a preteen responsible for their siblings' behaviors. Now, if there was an adult they could call, or next door neighbor or somebody to call if something went wrong real quick, to do that. But young kids, as you know, 5 and 6 year olds, they're quick, they're fast.
Mhm.
When they want to be. 7 year olds, they can get into places in a heartbeat before you think about it. And 12 year
Well,
olds.
our goal, I think, Mike, is to teach people how to put a better fence around them.
Yes.
Okay?
Yep.
If you have a good fence around them, those things don't really matter. How can you, whether you hold a teenager accountable or not, I guess from my perspective, is before I leave a teenager responsible, I have put a good fence around by saying, thank you, God, for covering and having your hedge of protection around my family and my
Yeah.
children. And so I've set a fence around them in a belief system that's going to allow a better result and a good consequence for whatever I'm doing in life. And I think if we stay less focused on the what's wrong, but focus on the how to
Yeah.
create a better way of getting to the consequences, the choices, and the expectations that
Yeah.
we want and need and desire. The world is so caught up in the what's wrong and the how different ways of fixing it and psychoanalyzing, if you
Yeah.
will,
Yeah.
that it's so easy to throw the Bible, and I talk about the Bible. I'm a pastor, proud of it. I love my Bible. It's basic instructions before leaving earth.
Yeah.
Mentioned that in the last show.
Yeah.
Bible, basic instructions before leaving earth. God gave us all the answers that we need, and if people can take the simple basic instructions from the Word, and when they see a fence, whatever that fence is, if it's a fence of insecurity or a fence of your child not doing well in school, and start using the Word of God, or start using even just your mindset that I want a better result,
Yeah.
and start speaking that, calling that thing that is not. You are a straight A student. I know you got it in you. And they're getting Fs. Instead of saying, why do you keep failing?
Yeah.
You know, why do you keep failing? I'm not going to put up with this. You're going to be grounded. Calling that thing that is not. That's biblical. So when we use our words to our children or to our spouses, to our families, it's not what you say, but how you say it. You are a straight A student. Start calling that thing for your child. Start calling the safety and the protection so that you don't have to worry about their fences. We all have fences.
Yeah.
We're going to have them. Our goal is to take down those fences and overcome them, and to be better and more positive because of that.
And the biggest part of that is to recognize you have a fence.
Right, exactly.
And so many of us don't.
Yeah, and we may have created those fences. You had mentioned on your last show that, you know, just for parents to say, well, I didn't have an education and I did just fine. I didn't have an education. Well, those kids hear that. You're setting them either to go one way or the other. Some kids may take that and say, well, my parents did okay and they didn't get an education, so I don't have to go to school.
Yep.
You know, you've set a fence around them.
Yep.
But there might be that other one that says, yeah, and I see what they're doing for a living, and I see their struggle, so I'm not going to allow that to happen to me. Either way, those boundaries and fences are there. They are set by our words, our actions, the way we are raising our children, the things we're saying. So if we're more in tune to what we're causing and what we're creating in them by what we're doing as the example and the leader.
And you mentioned that earlier about expectations. And I talk about expectations a lot, especially when I do couples counseling.
Right.
What do you expect out of him? What do you expect out of her in the future? And blah, blah, blah. And we cover, it's a long session that covers that. But our expectations build fences.
Uh-huh. Yes.
And
they
it's
do.
like we talked about, you know, your dad was not a good dad. You're going to be like your dad. My expectations are, you're not going to be any better than him.
Right.
And I tell that to you enough, it becomes something you might want to believe.
Mhm.
And until you learn that that's a fence and understand that that's a fence, or it's an obstacle, however you want to word it,
Mhm.
that it's something that you do not have to become.
Right.
You can be better than that, or change direction, or do what you want
Bible
to do.
refers to it as a stronghold.
Well, it is a
Strongholds, the
stronghold.
strongholds in your mind.
Yeah.
It's a stronghold, and you cast down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the word of God. It takes down the strongholds of your mind. Stronghold is something that holds you back. Mine, for example, we had talked about before, reading out loud in front of people because
Yeah.
I had been intimidated. I had been teased about that. I had a hang up. That was a stronghold in my mind that was causing me to stumble through 30 years later. I'm still stumbling because of that stronghold, and we can break those strongholds.
You can, and you will, and you have, obviously.
Yeah,
And you're doing well
cast
with
it
that.
down and everything.
But the other thing that I
Imaginations.
talk with a lot of parents about is when you ask the standard questions, who, what, where, why, and when,
Mhm.
is to listen to the answers.
Right.
If you ask the question, listen to the answer.
Right.
And there's another one, I've got to get this and find it again, but it's a story written by a psychologist about a young person, and it's saying, listen to what I'm not saying.
Mhm.
And that's so important. If you ask those 4 or 5 questions, who, when something happens, who, what, where, why, and when,
Mhm.
listen to what's said, and also listens to what's not said.
Right. Right.
And
listen to understand and speak to be understood.
Yes. And if you can do those things, you'll have a much, much better communication system with your child or your children, because that's what these shows are all about, is helping parents understand how to raise their children. And I'm not going to sit here for 1 minute and say parents don't know how to do that, because we all do to a certain level. And I don't think parents talk enough between parents
Mhm.
about different techniques and styles and things that they use and things they were taught, what works, what doesn't work. A lot of what worked but could have been done differently or a little better.
Right.
All these things don't seem to be talked about. And one of the books that I've written, I talk about when a woman has a new baby, mother-in-law, older sisters, younger sisters, everybody's watching how you raise that baby. Because
Oh yeah.
they think the older ones think they know better. The younger ones are trying to learn of what's going on.
Right.
And the older ones will come in with, well, did you think about this? And could you have done that? And back and forth, until mom either gets totally upset and chases everybody away, or takes control of the role she's playing, which we talked about on the last show, and says, okay, I don't mind all this information, but we're going to do this in an organized manner.
Right.
Because it is my child. And you're not raising it, I am.
Right.
And that's okay, because you need to establish yourself as the parent. And I don't know how many parents actually do that either. Some of them, I think, they know they're the parent, but when it comes to defending your child, you got to defend them with reality. They're not always innocent.
Right.
Sometimes there's a little something that needs to be discussed and taken care of, but the role you play in that as a parent, oh, this thing has gone crazy on me, I'm sorry. I'm gonna get this thing, lost everything. We're going to try and figure out how to, first of all, like we said, be age appropriate, stop building fences around our children, and recognize the fences we build around ourselves that we don't hand on to our children. And that happens so many times, and it's a big concern to a lot of people now and it's starting to show in some of the conversations you see on TV and other places, and some of the TV shows about how parents are raising children. What involvement do they have in it? And you know, it's a thin line, because when you get old enough, when the child gets old enough, you have to get your life back to a certain extent. I mean, most mothers take some time off and they get their maternity leave time. And I like they're now starting to recognize fathers with maternity leave. That's starting to come. And the fence, they've not built the fence around the father, saying you don't have to be the maternity leave parent, just your wife. And they're removing that fence. Now that's not coming very quickly, but it's still coming. Because I've seen it written down and I've seen it talked about on TV. And a lot of other countries today have taken that fence away from the father and saying, if you want maternity leave, you can have it. If your wife wants maternity leave, she can have it, or she can have it for a while, then you can have it for a while while she goes back into the, and they're doing that, which is really important, because, you know, the fences, the male, female fences that are built around us, they're still today very strong. As you see on TV a lot about women equality and all that stuff that's going on, those are fences that were built years and years and years ago. And they, you know, should they have been built? No, of course not. But they have been. And the only fence I know that's built around men and women is men can't have babies. That's the only fence. We can't do that. You can, we can't. But that needs to stop there. And we build our fences. We build our fences.
It depends on how you look at it, though, because maternity leave is maternity.
Yeah.
Which is carrying a child and giving birth, correct?
Right.
Then what part in that if a male can't have? See,
Can't,
see, there's,
well,
there's,
yeah, good point.
We all have our fences.
Good point, but obviously
know,
we don't carry, we can't carry the child.
As a woman, though,
Yeah.
you spend 9 months carrying, you go through labor, your body changes, you have a lot of things.
What if they call it paternity leave? Maybe they call it paternity leave instead of maternity. Well, that's for the men, for the women I'm talking, for the men I'm talking about. But anyway, they do share that now, which they never used to do. I've never heard of that.
And I think the men, I'm kidding. I think they should carry the baby.
Well,
that just seems unfair.
There's a lot of women that think that.
I'm just kidding.
and you might have something
You
there.
may
I'm
have
glad
some
I
people in
don't.
the audience.
I've watched my wife carry 3 babies, and I don't want to carry one. Trust me. Don't want to carry one. So we got about 2 minutes left.
That earns you a vacation.
Yeah, that earns me a big vacation. But they are, you know, the fences are slowly being knocked down.
Yes.
And that's the important part of, we're having some fun with this conversation, but and I agree, but the fences are slowly being knocked down because men are being allowed to take time off to raise a child, which was never happened before. And I know it's very popular overseas, very popular in Europe, and I know it's coming to this country because I've heard about companies doing it now. They need to do that. It's like you look at the big companies now that have the work areas are like a big playground. You know, the old fences about you go to work, you go in the door, you close your door, and you stay type. I got it. Okay. We're talking about knocking down fences, and I really hope some people can come on board, can email No Fences Incorporated or No Fences INC at gmail.com if you have any questions for the show, if you have any comments about what we're talking about. Gladly respond to them. If you want to come on the show, email nofencesinc at gmail.com and let us know you want to come on the show. And we should have some interesting conversations. With that, Carrie and I are going to say good night and goodbye, and we'll see you on the next show.